Whoa, 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 whoa. Catch it, put it in a jar.
In 2023, Museum of Toronto embarked on the 52 Stories of Women Who Transformed Toronto. This multi-year project celebrates the different women and individuals who made their mark on the ways we work, learn, and live. They are scientists, artists, community organizers, entrepreneurs, athletes, doctors, politicians, writers, and educators. They are refugees, Indigenous, queer, and trans. Some lived long ago. Others are alive and working today. In their own unique ways, they all kicked down barriers and forged new paths that made it easier for the generations that came after them. In March of 2025, the Museum of Toronto is premiering an exhibition, a performance and an education program across the city and online that celebrates the exceptional work and lives of these 52 women. This is a preview.
I think the 52 is different because it brings the history of the city, the women who made a difference in the past.
It feels like reclaiming these stories can change our understanding of history. In particular, reclaiming women's history.
Their stories are exciting, heartbreaking, inspiring, and courageous. And ultimately, life today wouldn't be the same without them and their work.
We really thought about the breadth and depth of who we were representing. And we do make comments that it could have been 52 other women. We are not the arbitraries of history. We're simply making a choice of 52 extraordinary women that we want to share with the people of Toronto.
Dear Maria, thank you for your letter, which I really enjoyed. Some might think that the Right Honourable Adrienne Clarkson doesn't have time to read letters from grade 6 students at Dovercourt Public School, but I enjoy learning about how much we have in common, particularly as females and immigrants. I came to Canada when I was 2.5 years old. In 1941, when the Japanese conquered Hong Kong, my family was fortunate enough to get on a boat as part of a Red Cross exchange. We settled in Ottawa on Sussex Street. 60 years later, I now live at the other end of Sussex Street, which is where Rideau Hall is located. I went to public school, just like you, and I loved Lisgar Collegiate. When your parents say that you can't go to high school because a grade 8 education is good enough for a girl, you can tell them that the first refugee, the first person of Chinese descent, the first bilingual Anglophone to hold the office of the Governor General of Canada, says that you have to continue. It will change your life.
The 52 was inspired by the first project actually that I did at my museum called The Women of the Ward, which was a walking tour of the neighborhood formerly known as the Ward, where we collaborated with John Lawrence and Tatum Taylor Chauble.
John and Tatum have written a book about the ward, and we're really interested in creating a walking tour. And in true Museum of Toronto fashion, we didn't create a walking tour where we had simply someone speaking. We actually commissioned 4 playwrights to write short monologues. And as you tour through the city, you get contextualizing material, but also these kind of unexpected performances that are delivered live.
We chose the number 52 because women currently represent 52% of the population in the city. And so we thought we would tell the stories of 52 women in a way that champions their achievements, their contribution to city life, and really expand our understanding of how women have historically been important in our city in a way that we haven't seen yet.
I think that's the thing about Women in the Ward that really struck me. It wasn't so much a formal rendition of history or a biographical reading, but it takes a moment of someone's history to really talk through the personal as a way of telling the history of these women.
The notion of sharing the stories of these historical women through personal monologues was really this notion of sharing history and their histories through a very humanizing lens.
I remember following a professor down into the vaults under the National Gallery in Washington to see these priceless paintings that had been shipped to the US for safekeeping. It was so quiet. I was so close to these masterpieces, no railings or ropes between us. I felt tethered to the artists, to the places the paintings had been. That immediacy, that intimacy, it changes you. 2 years later, I accepted a job as head of circulating exhibitions and adult education at the Art Gallery of Toronto. You probably know it as the AGO. In 1947, the whole gallery had a staff of only 10. We were all multitaskers. Everyone stepped up to the plate wherever needed. We were like the little family. There were no offices, and I sat in the corridor. It was all quite rudimentary, but very civilized. I joined the women's committee at the gallery. We were a force. We worked our butts off, and we loved it. These women had knowledge of contemporary art and ingenious fundraising skills. We came up with crazy ideas and made pots and pots of money. We started the gallery's gift shop and art rental program and used the money we made to buy new art for the gallery. That core collection has since become legendary. I curated landmark experimental exhibitions, unlike anything else the gallery was showing. We, a group of volunteer women, were influencing the contemporary art scene in Toronto, in Canada, at a time when no one wanted us influencing much of anything.
The whole team was very, very diligent about thinking through what are the categories. So we thought arts and culture, politics, science and technology, civic life, and sport. So we had these 5 categories as places where we knew that women had made a difference.
There were quite literally hundreds of women, like just an Excel spreadsheet of hundreds of women and like everything that they'd done, and then slotted those women accordingly. And then we also, to try to make the list somewhat objective, although it is very subjective, because of historical, social, political barriers, it was more difficult to fill out certain categories like science and sport, whereas like community was a big one because, you know, prior to not that long ago, the only sort of major impact a lot of women could have was within their local communities. I think a huge challenge in determining a list is defining what is historically significant. There are always going to be conflicting ideas of what that means, how visible or invisible their histories were. This was our list, but really in the attempt to put together a list of 52, it's more of an invitation more broadly to think about what are the various contributions to the history of our city that we are unaware of or that we need to know more about.
Here you come again, saying I'm your friend. Tell her I am gay, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you. That's the lyrics to my biggest single, Any Other Way. Charted top 10 in Toronto, babe. I'm Jackie Shane, and you won't forget it. I'm a soul singer, I'm a performer, and girl, I'm me, rocking long hair and jewels like you've never seen. I'm a free-ass motherfucker who is proudly and openly trans, and I never apologize for who I am. Let me tell you where I came from. 1950s Nashville, Tennessee, the scene that revolutionized music. A few of my friends, Princess Lavon, Patsy Vidalia, Esquerita, Bobby Marchand. Oh, and a cat called Little Richard. Heard of him? Each of these people was some of the freest, flyest, most genderqueer players in rock and roll, then and to this day. A couple touring connections through Setlin and Wilson's Carnival brought me from Nashville to Montreal to the place I called home. In the warm spring of 1961, I landed in Toronto.
What these stories reveal about the city is that there are so many movers and shakers whose work goes unnoticed and whose work isn't always celebrated during their lifetime. I think what's going to be exciting for visitors to the exhibition is the different ways that you can engage with this content. Beyond the context that they lived in, how some of their work intersects, connects with others, builds on others. There is this really wonderful relationship across time where you can see how one woman's actions resulted in the work of another woman. She paved the way for this other woman to do this other thing several generations later. And I hope visitors come away inspired. The real draw for people into the exhibition, there's the women that we all kind of know about. You know, there's Margaret Atwood or even Jackie Shane. We highlight the popular people that people know about, and then that's how we get them through the door, and then we say, aha, actually, like 40 of those women you've never heard of before. Learn about them. As a history nerd, that's very exciting for me because I love an exhibition where I show up and I take away so much that I didn't know before. So many of these women do sort of inhabit the background of a lot of our lives, but we're so unaware of it. And I'm hoping that visitors to the exhibition, both Torontonians and people from everywhere, will come into the exhibition and then leave and look at Toronto differently.
Elsie McGill here. Does anyone know what a horizon indicator gauge 88780 is? I used one during my first assignments when I became an aeronautical engineer. I keep it on my bedside table, actually. It's from World War II. It makes me think of those times when I went up on test flights and would use this gauge to see the flat line of the horizon against what felt like the far reaches of the Earth. It was so exhilarating to test fly an airplane in the 1940s, let me tell you. Oh, that's a good question. Yes, people were shocked to see a woman studying engineering. Yes, they were. I can remember it like it was yesterday, walking into my first class at the University of Toronto. The smell of leather and chalk and sweat, and the sound of the large wooden doors closing behind me. All eyes, all male, turned to face me. Elizabeth Elsie McGill, a little-known nobody. And there I was being stared at as I then proceed to sit in the second row. Even the professor was startled, waiting for me to say I was in the wrong place. There was a growing whisper, and then I said, are we here to stare and gloat, or to learn? I'm here to learn. And from that time on, that was that. And yes, I was the first woman to be admitted into the electrical engineering program at the university. In the end, what truly did me being a woman matter? I was interested in how things worked, to learn about combustion and mechanics. This was my world. My upbringing was surrounded with the spirit that women could do anything and that it was society itself that had it all backwards.
We've hired a number of actors, we've cast all the roles, and we've filmed that. And that work is becoming part of what you will be able to experience digitally, that you'll be able to kind of dive into the histories of these women presented by various actors, telling the stories of the women. Evelyn Perry, who we've hired to be the director and producer of our live performance, will not only use those recordings and film work that we've already made, but is also going to think about how through dance, through spoken word, through other disciplines, the stories of these women will come alive.
In one sitting or in one viewing, you won't actually meet all 52. You'll have a path through a selection of, and I think there's just something interesting about it, like allowing the viewer to choose their own adventure, if you will. As a queer woman, I like to think about who our ancestors are that are not blood relations, and to think about like who are the shoulders that we stand on as feminists and storytellers and people who are change makers. I think there's that sense inside of this, of that kind of lineage of like, for many different people coming at these themes from many different lived experiences, that we're tracing some lineage for people and making those relations possible across time and space. I like that.
That was my move. That was mine. Now that I'm not around anymore, I can tell you. Here's how it went. I was the catcher, right? So I'd be there, ready. And Ruthie was the pitcher, and Doris played second. Someone from the other team was up to bat, so they had a runner on first. So what would happen is, Ruthie would pitch and duck real quick and get out of the way. Because once I caught the ball, I would throw it really quick to second, to Doris. Right from my crouch, I would throw it. And that runner going from first to second would be out, just like that. It was our special move. Served us well. I learned here on the res. My dad was a pitcher, so I was a catcher. First team I played with was in Caledonia. Heck, I was even too young for the team, but they wanted me to play with them, so I lied about my age. Said I was 12. Here I was, just 9. But I was good enough to play with them, so I did. After that, I went to Oswego Mohawks. That's when they started calling me Yogi. After the great catcher, Yogi Berra. On the field, I wasn't Phyllis Bomberry anymore. I was Yogi. And I was glad they gave me a name then and there, because later on, they started calling me other things. Being a catcher, you're close to everyone. You hear everything, all the stupid things they say. But you know, I never let that get to me. I never did. I just tuned it out. Like they weren't going to stop me like water off a duck's back. Then I got a call, as they might say. The Toronto Carpet Land team wanted me to play for them. They got me a job at the factory so I could make the practices. I got a little apartment on Church Street. Those years were the best years.
In doing the research, I'd sort of, because they were very compartmentalized, I had so many women in my mind, and it honestly wasn't until all the profiles went on the website and you could see them all 52 together that I was like, oh, women, so impressive.
People learning about another individual who has shaped the city they live in. So it's a bit like she told two friends who told two friends who told two friends. If every person who experiences the 52 goes away with knowledge of one woman that they didn't know about, and they share that with someone else, they've learned a bit of Toronto history, and that for us is success.
Women, as we know, are constantly under attack worldwide, even in countries like Canada and the US, and we just need to celebrate and promote women at every opportunity we can.
Against your ear and very carefully listen to what it wants you to hear. Whoa, 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 Find it sleeping in its nest before it wakes up. Touch it gently, you want it, feel it completely calm, so you can hold it in your palm and help it grow just like it was born to be. Come, 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 come. Whoa, whoa, whoa.